get one person to talk about it, I've done something, because I think people need to open up and people need to come forward and they just need to tell their story. And I know different people have different circumstances that they can't because of the secrets that are within Ireland, the hidden things, so I think that they need to, if you can get somebody, to open up and tell their story, it will help them just make awareness for people that this did go on. So I'm 53. I was born in 1969. I was born in Scotland, left Scotland when I was 2. And me and my family went to live in Africa for 10 years. So in Africa, I left when I was 12. My grandparents are from Ireland. So we moved back to a small village, Tidavnet in Monaghan, and went to secondary school. And I was a very quiet child. I wouldn't have had a great upbringing. There would have been a lot of alcohol growing up in my house. And being the eldest, my mother, they had to get married. My father was Catholic in Scotland. My mother was Protestant, which didn't really work well. So my mother converted to Catholic. And I always got the sense that I was being blamed for her getting married because I was always treated differently to all of them. So which left me very quiet and very withdrawn, and just, and I would have done a lot of babysitting at home with the younger brothers and sisters that came along. And there was always so much more expected of me. When I was about 15, there was a friend that came to the house. And because I didn't have a great relationship with my parents, he would have noticed this. He was 35. And what I know now, I didn't know then, but he actually groomed me and showed me affection, which I didn't get at home. So therefore, he took advantage, basically, and found out I was pregnant. And I was at school. I was 5 months pregnant before I went to the doctor because I was just totally green. I didn't know anything at that stage. So then went to the doctor, found out I was pregnant. And this was like, what am I supposed to do? My father was very aggressive and I knew I couldn't go home and say it. And one of the teachers at school noticed that I'd become more withdrawn than I would have been and took me into the office and questioned me. Was I on drugs? Was anybody bullying? Was anybody doing anything? And I wouldn't give in. And for about 2 hours, they kept me in that office. And then a priest was brought in to question me, and I still wouldn't say. And then the teacher asked me the question, "Are you pregnant?" And I broke down. And I says, "I can't go home. I can't, I'm going to be killed if I go home. Like, this won't happen." Like, and then they decided then that they would take me home and tell my parents. And this was like, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. So it ended up then they did take me home and my parents weren't there. My parents were in the pub. So I came home and started into the normal household duties that I would have done, like lighting the fire, getting the dinner on. That's what I done when I came home from school. And I told them there was no point staying because I don't know what time they'd be home. And they stayed. And next thing, my parents drove up the drive and walked into the room and told the rest of them to leave, the younger ones. And we were sitting, and the teacher said, we're here to let you know that Sharon's pregnant. And my mother turned around and says, well, thank God she's not on drugs. And I'm going, where's that coming from? Do you know, because like in 1985, like it wasn't as big as now. So I'm going, where's that coming from? So the priest then come up with the Good Shepherd Convent in Dunboyne. And it was he could get me into this place, and I would be looked after there, and I could have the baby and come back home as normal. So they left with that information. I had to let him know the next day whether I was going to it or not. So when they left, my father asked me who the father was, and I couldn't tell him because it was a friend. They weren't going to believe me. Do you know, like that wasn't going to happen. So I kind of made up a story that we used to go to the teenage discos, and it was a boy there who was from England, and he's way back to England. It was all I could think of. And then I got the option. Then I either went to Dunboyne, stayed there, had the baby, but under no circumstance was that baby coming home. Don't even think about it. Don't even question it. It's not happening. Or the other option was I stayed at home, and that if anybody came to the house, I had to go to my room, and I wasn't allowed to leave my room until they left. And I thought, well, the first option seems better. I have more freedom, you know, rather than hiding in my bedroom. And we're talking like it was the 25th of November that I went to Dunboyne. So it was near Christmas. We always went to my grandmother's at Christmas. I was told I wasn't allowed to go there. I had to stay at home. There was no way I was going. And I'm going, this isn't much of a life. So I opted for Dunboyne and went and told the priest. So within about, I'd say less than 2 weeks, I was put on a bus on my own at 15 years of age and sent to Dublin. Never been there before in my life, never been anywhere without my parents. And I'd heard so many stories of Dublin about people being stabbed, and I was petrified. And I sat on the bus, and when I got to the Gresham, this woman came on, not in a nun habit. She was just in ordinary clothes. And she came onto the bus and she goes, is your name Sharon? And I goes, yeah. She goes, come with me. I didn't know who she was, but I went. And we went to Dunboyne, and we were tucked into a wee room. And in the room, she sent one of the girls or something to get me tea and toast. So that was fine. The place was full, that I had to sleep on a camp bed for 5 weeks. There was no beds. And I was totally numb. I didn't know what was going on. It was like, this was crazy. Like, but I done what I was told and went and done what I was told. To be fair, I was in one of the better mother and baby homes. I wasn't treated badly. I've heard shocking stories of what's happened, but with me, I can't say that. We did our chores. Like I would have had to mop and brush downstairs and stuff like that, and cook, help in the kitchen, or help, that wee porta cabin that you pack cards into plastic envelopes. So it really, it wasn't that bad, and you were fed. And I suppose description of it would be, it was like a zoo. You were being looked after, kept warm, and a roof over your head, like the animals in the cage. But you weren't given any support, you weren't given any affection, you weren't given any information with regards to labour or what to expect or anything. There was nothing. There was no counselling. There was no support like that. So to me, my description is like a zoo. You look after the animals. So I was there all over Christmas. I wasn't allowed home over Christmas. I never got a phone call Christmas Day to wish me happy Christmas. I was basically left there and forgot about it. And they did come up, I think it was about 2 weeks after Christmas. They come up to see me. My father had come up before that on his own, but my mother only came once to see me and brought my youngest sister. No, she was 9 months. Brought her up to visit, and I thought, like, how cruel is that? You're bringing a baby into a mother and baby home with all these women who possibly can't even keep their children. So then that was fair enough. I continued. So my daughter was due the 21st of March in 1985, 86. I went into labour on the 21st of February 1986. And they wouldn't really take you to the hospital unless there was a few of them because of money for the diesel or whatever. So it ended up another girl was in labour, so I was sent with her. And when I went to the hospital, I was examined and told I wasn't in labour. And it was Holles Street in Dublin was the hospital. So I was left in this room with just a bed in the middle of the floor. And I was told that there was no beds free in the hospital, and that I would have to wait and see either a bed came free or, hold on 1 second. Okay, right, see you later, close that door. Sorry. So I was told I had to wait, either the bus would come back for me or until they found a bed. So I must have been in that room about 4 hours. And when they did come, they told me that there was a bed free. And as I got up off the bed, the whole bed was covered in blood. So I was took down to the labour ward. Now, the labour ward was totally different to what it is now. All I remember, Lola, all I remember was there was a bed in the middle of the floor. And I was told by a doctor to put my legs up on a stirrup. I didn't know what was going on because nobody had told me. And he came with this big needle to break my waters. And still, I was totally oblivious to what was going on. And then there was about 10 cubicles along the back wall. And I was put into the furthest one. And I was left there until I was ready to deliver. And with nobody, like no mother, no friend, no nurse, no nothing. And totally petrified. I don't think I've ever been as scared in my life. And that was fine. So then I gave birth to my daughter, who wasn't breathing properly. So she had to go into intensive care. And she was in intensive care for the length of time I was in the hospital, which was about 7 days. But I asked one of the nurses, could I go up and see her? And there was one lovely nurse, and she let me go up every day. I went up there in the morning, came down for my dinner, went back up, came down for my tea, went back up, and spent my whole time up in intensive care. Then I rang my mother the morning that I had her, and my mother goes, "That's nice, what's the weather like?" And that was the response I got. And the nurse had took a Polaroid picture of her, and I told my mother that I had photos, and she told me that if she ever come across them photos, she'd burn them. So I knew there was no hope in this. Like this was it. Like I was on my own. So I stayed in the hospital, I suppose, for about 7 days, and then I didn't remember whether I went back to Dunboyne, but I'm friendly with two of the girls still that was there, and they told me that I did go back. And they said, like, all you done was cried. You cried solidly. Nobody could console you. Nobody could help you. You just cried solidly. And my parents came and collected me and took me home, and was never mentioned. Never mentioned it, I never was asked how I felt. Wasn't asked, was it, how was the mother and baby home? How were you treated? How do you feel? And was told I wanted to go back to school. Like, I was only 16. I wanted to go back to school. And I was told no, I wasn't allowed to go back to school. They had arranged a job for me in a hotel to wash dishes. And I went to work 2 weeks after I come home from Dunboyne. So I'd say in all, it would have been probably about 3 or 4 weeks after I'd give birth, I was sent to work. And to this day, my mother still won't speak about it. I don't speak to my mother. I haven't spoke to my mother in 10 years. I have tried to confront her about it. And when I said to her about the father, when they found out who the father was, they blamed me. It was my fault. So that's basically where I am. I did find out where she was, and I wrote her a letter. She did reply and wanted to know why she was in intensive care. I couldn't tell her because I didn't know. All I knew was she wasn't breathing properly. I didn't know the whole history because I was so young. Like, I didn't know what was going on. So I gave her the information that I knew, which was very little. And she said that she didn't want to meet, but that she would communicate through letters. She would keep in contact through letters. That was 7 years ago. And it's, I kind of feel that she got the information about the hospital medically, and maybe that's what she wanted. Or maybe because I have heard from a lot of people, because of their adopted parents, they don't want to upset them. And that's fine. Like, I do understand that. And I don't want to, like, that's been her life. They are her parents. I'm her birth mother, but they're her parents. But the thing I find is hardest for me, like, I'm her birth mother, but I will never be her mother. I will never be her mother. Like, I don't know her. The best I can hope for is a friendship in years to come. That's the best I can hope for. I've been through counselling for years. I went through 20 years of depression. I have 2 grown-up kids here. I have a 30-year-old and a 27-year-old. They know, but when they were growing up, there's a lot of things I don't remember of their childhood because I was so closed off and so full of depression that I just went through the motions of cooking, cleaning, doing their schoolwork, taking them to school, that kind of stuff. There wouldn't have been, growing up, there wouldn't have been the affection of hugging and stuff like that from my parents. So because of what happened, I find it very difficult to give affection, to hug my kids, to, do all that. And sometimes I feel guilty about that, like, I love them to bits, but I just find it difficult to, walk up to somebody and give them a hug. With regards to, like, I'm married 26 years, but I do think, maybe if I had been different at that time, I would have got married for the right reason, if that makes sense. Because I had my 2 children before I got married, and I did get married to tidy things up because they were going to school and that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, I care about them and all that there, but there's an age gap. He's 67, I'm 53. And we both probably got into it for the wrong reason, which has left maybe a kind of a strain now, but we're working through it. And then I suppose, in a sense, it was abuse. The man that done what he done, it was abuse. And it was my first time, which I didn't know. So to me, it just feels abnormal because of that. And then the relationship after him, I was abused again. So it seemed to be that every relationship after that, it was because I was so insecure and so emotionally wrecked from the whole, because it was a trauma. It's a trauma that you will never get over. And like, as far as I'm concerned, I have my 2 kids here, but there's that part missing. There's a part inside me that's missing. And until such times, if it happens, hopefully it does, I don't think that part will ever be replaced. And I do feel, speaking out about what happened to me, yes, it's traumatic every time I speak about it, but it's like it happened yesterday because I remember every detail. But I think in order to speak out about this, that one person maybe will say, oh my God, look at the courage she has. Maybe I can do that. And maybe I can get the word out. And that maybe, because I know before, I had nobody to talk to about it when I was younger. And then there was loads of pages on Facebook over the years. You know, you had birth mothers, you had adoption rights alliance, you had all of them pages. And when I started joining them and I realized I wasn't on my own, I wasn't on my own. And there's hundreds and hundreds of women out there in the same position. And I feel sorry for the older women who maybe have never told their husband, who have never told their children, don't know anything about Facebook, don't know anything about that. And they're living with that hurt and that secret inside, and they can't speak out. And it's just eaten away. And that's why if people can speak out and open up about it, it does release a certain amount. And the fact that you realize I'm not alone here. I could safely say, maybe, what do I say now? I'm 53 and I probably would have been working at the age of 20, 19 or 20 maybe, that I would have spoke with maybe a colleague at work. I probably would have spoke to my aunt maybe around that time, my father's sister, but she had heard it through the wee village we lived in. So the talk was round the village. So she had heard it. So I had probably said it to her, but she'd already known and she knew who the father was. But she was totally disgusted at my family because it was like I could have stayed with her. Do you know, I could have stayed with her. I had family over in Scotland and I could have went and stayed with them and nobody would have known anything. So it caused a rift between outside as well. So I suppose I would have been about 19 or 20, maybe, that I started talking about it. But then there would have been that stigma that would have been from being in the mother and baby home, that I probably would have been, if I told people, what are they going to think of me? They're going to think I'm a slut. They're going to think that I'm, one of these girls that are out with everybody. So there would have been that there that would have held me back because I didn't want people to think that I was that kind of person, even though I knew I wasn't. But it was the stigma of that was the problem. So then when, I suppose when I went through intensive counselling and would have talked through in the counsellor, I started then speaking out and joining groups and stuff like that, and just opening up. I've been on my local radio station. I tried to set up a group in Monaghan here, but because Monaghan is such a small town and people talk, you weren't going to get anybody to come to them groups, because it would be like, if they didn't know this happened, what if they found out? Like, I understood that. So for that reason, I wanted to set up a group to give somewhere safe for these women to come and talk. But that never happened. It was it was finding the right place that wasn't open so that they could come in secret and talk. And then, so that didn't work. So then I went on the radio station. Then I done something else. I've spoke on radio stations, and then I done the thing with Alison, and that's basically it. It's just like, I need to get people to talk about this, to release the pain that they're suffering.
What would you say happens when people don't speak out, when they just hold it in?
Well, first of all, there's the depression. Then depression leads to alcohol. Then depression leads to secluding yourself and not going out. Then you're living with the fear of people finding out. You're constantly telling lies about, in case people find out. And I do believe, this kind of is probably way off the scale, but I do believe that people that suffer with pain, hurt, it's denial that brings on cancer, because it's eaten away inside all the time. And I think that's my personal view on, like, I'm not saying it's all the time, but I do think, like, I do remember, like, when I had my daughter, that was, when I worked away and carried on with my life. And then when my two here were, when my son was 12, now my son was 2 when I got married, my daughter was a year. And 2 weeks before my wedding, I got a photograph from the social worker of my daughter that was given up for, or taken through adoption. And that floored me, because she was the spit of me at that age. And it freaked me out. And this was 2 weeks before my wedding. But then when my two turned 12, I was like, why am I hiding her? She's mine. I gave birth to her. She's not living here. I don't have any contact, but I'm denying her. So I ended up then blowing up the photograph, putting it on my wall, along with my other two. And I sat them down and I told them what had happened. Well, not in too much detail, but that I had another daughter and she was living somewhere in Ireland, and that hopefully someday we'll get in touch. And my daughter that lives here, she says to me, when can I meet? That was the first thing she said. And it was then the photographs went up, and it was then I started saying, this is who I am. That experience made me who I am today. I am strong, I am strong-willed, and I will support. I don't judge anybody. I will not judge anybody. A person is a person, and they are who they are through circumstances, whatever reason. I don't judge. I don't criticize. I don't do anything like that. I accept person at face value. And when I put them photographs up on the wall, and I had people coming into the house saying, who's that? Who's that? And I just openly said, this. And they were all interested in the story. But it's not a story. you know, you say this, they're interested in the story, but this is my life. This is my life. It's not just a story. And it's like, but I still find today, if somebody asks me, how many children have you? I'll say two. Because there's still that wee thing there of being judged. And that's back to then the stigma. There's still that wee thing there. Don't say what happened. Don't say. But that's denying her, and that's living a lie. So these women who haven't opened up about anything, they're living with a lie to themselves, which is eating them up. It has to be eating them up. And it has to be causing so much illness, so much sickness, like possibly overweight, bulimia, anorexia, just total fear. Until they open up, that's not going to go. They're going to live with that for the rest of their life. And it's what Ireland has done. Do you know, it is what, and they're still doing it with regards to the testimonies. I done that, and it was total lies that they printed. And now the redress, they're delaying that and delaying that. They tell you that you're not, you know, if you were a mother and baby home, and if you were in it less than 4 months, you're not entitled to a redress. Why? Most of the women were in it less than 4 months because they weren't there the whole 9 months of their pregnancy, a lot of them. So why discriminate against the ones that were there less than 4 months? That's making little of us again for the shame, or you're going to be punished for that now because of what you done. And, you know, it's stuff like that, like it never goes away. There's always something that triggers, brings you back to there, brings you back, slightest wee trigger. And I think Ireland, I don't know, I'm not sure about other countries, but I'm sure they're much the same. But Ireland in particular, because it's supposed to be such a Catholic country, it's not Christian. It might be Catholic, but it's not Christian. Because a Christian, you know, you help others, you support others, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's not what happened. So there's a journalist, Alison Giggins, and we, to do with the, was it the birth mothers or first mothers? I was part of that group, and we went to, it was a big hotel in Dublin, was it the Wesleyan in Dublin? And Sapone, Minister Sapone at the time, was doing this talk on institutions, you know, like, I don't know, you had the mother and baby homes, you had boys, something or other. It was all these, you know, where adopted children went or orphan children. And she was doing a talk on that. And we went as a group, and Alison was there, and she done an interview with me in the corridor, you know, in the hall, and just a bit about my story. And then she contacted me, and I done another interview with her one other time as well. I forget what it was. And then she came to me and she said, I'm thinking of doing this, these videos here on YouTube. She says, would you be interested? And I goes, yeah, no problem. And she says, but I need you to tell your story, and it's going on YouTube. You'll be filmed and all. And I goes, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I have no problem with it. So she came here and done the video in my house. And there was a part 1 and a part 2. And she done the part 1 And then the part 2 came out after Christmas. I forget, I think it was during the lockdown or something like that. And it was Stay With Me Arts. I think that's the name of it, Stay With Me Art. And went up on YouTube, part 1. And the views were off the scale, off the scale. And then part 2 went up. And I don't know how many views it got on YouTube, but it was like, oh my God, these people are actually interested in what I have to say. And so I was kind of overwhelmed by this. I thought, like, this is only my life, And so that's how that came about. And then Alison contacted me there, I'm going to say about 2 months ago. I'm not 100% sure. And she goes, do you realize the views that you have on TikTok? And I goes, what do you mean TikTok? And she goes, that's Stay With Me Arts on TikTok. And it's off the scale. The views on your story is off the scale. And I'm going, right, okay. This is weird, So I went on to TikTok and lo and behold, it was just off the scale. And Alison has put it on the map. All of these mothers, and she has just put it out there. She's not afraid to put anything out. And I admire her for what she has done. And if she called me in the morning to do an interview, I'd be there. Because she has helped so many women come out and speak their story. And she has put it out to the world. YouTube's for the world. TikTok's for the world, for people to see. And I just hope and pray that some of these women have got the courage now to open up and speak up and say, yes, this happened to me. So over the years, living with the silence left me emotionally drained. I had no weight. I was always very pale, sickly. I was always colds and flus and just wasn't healthy. And crying, severe depression, didn't want to get up, didn't want to do anything. But when I eventually started opening up and telling people, the beginning, yes, there was a certain amount of guilt because there would have been a certain amount of stigma connected to being in a mother and baby home. And not only being in a mother and baby home, but having a child and not married at such a young age. There was always that, what were you doing? How did you get pregnant? But when I started opening up and realized that the majority of the people didn't judge, the majority of the people seen a child who was took advantage of and got herself into this position, that it wasn't entirely her fault. It gave me the strength and the power to speak more. And it gave me the strength and the power to realize having that experience at such a young age made me the person I am today. And I think the person I am today is courageous. I would be, and that would be part of it. I would be very particular in stuff that I do, like I bake cakes, and I would be very focused. And I learned how to do that because it was easier to focus on something than focus on the pain. So if I do something now, I'm 110% in that zone. I'm not thinking of anything else. I'm not. So having gone through that experience has given me that trait of being able to be meticulous and everything in what I do. And it gave me more power to realize that I need to help more women to speak out. I need them to speak out so that they don't feel the way that I felt, and they can stop feeling the way I felt. So for me to speak out is, I suppose it gives me, a bit of a thrill maybe, that I'm helping somebody, even if I don't know who that person is, that telling my story is giving one woman the courage to say, that happened to me. And that's all I ask from doing any of these things. That's all I ever want, is just to help one woman.